feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am your host, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside my co-host. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
I ain't got time to bleed, Matt. It's my best Jesse Ventura.
Yeah, from the hit movie Predator.
Yep.
Which today we are reviewing Dan Trachtenberg's Prey, starring Amber Midthunder, Dakota Beavers, Dane DiLiegro, Stormee Kipp, Michelle Thrush, Julian, Black Antelope, and more. Eric, how you doing?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good. I'm excited to talk a little bit about this Predator prequel. I've been going through the series since
I saw
watching
that
Prey
on your letterbox,
a little bit of a-
EM6211 on
yeah. Promote me. A little bit of a Pred head.
You are a little bit of a breadhead. You were, yeah. I think we did that recently too, didn't we? Like, well, not recently. It's
Well, we rewatched Predator 2, which was probably like 5 years ago. Where
I think I must have watched Predator 1 before that, though. I think, and then
it's just one of those movies that's constant, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And then we saw The Predator, Shane Black's The Predator at Midnight Madness at TIFF a few years ago. So yes, this is a movie that will be streaming on Hulu. It's produced by 20th Century Studios, but after Disney bought Fox, there was that whole time of what they were going to do with 20th Century Fox franchises like Prey, like Predator and
Alien
and things like that.
Die Hard,
yeah. So we got our answer with they might be streaming movies now,
or series, because Alien is apparently going to be a Noah Hawley series.
Yeah.
And we should also mention for people in Canada that this will be available on Disney Plus Canada.
That is correct. Also will be available in English and Comanche. There's a Comanche version that we did not get to watch because we only had the English version available to us. But I did want to point that out because I probably would have chosen that version, although I believe it might be a dub.
It is a dub, but with the actors coming back to record their dubs,
kind of like RRR, the Hindi version that's streaming on Netflix. So
yes,
which we will talk about in the newest episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. So go check that out as well. But let's get into it. Prey. Dan Trachtenberg, you guys would know him from 10 Cloverfield Lane. Also one of the best internet success stories. Went from a podcaster to a short filmmaker, got noticed with his Portal short film, and now he's making Predator movies, which is wild. So,
well, it's that strange as well, because you mentioned 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was a
and
really
I got Cherry Coke Zero, baby. Also talked about my trip to Niagara Falls on the latest episode.
Yeah, a delightful surprise in the Cloverfield universe, and gave John Goodman a great villainous turn.
Underrated movie, good movie.
But it's interesting that it took him this long to make a follow-up, because
he's been attached to like a million
effort.
Things.
Fields?
He was doing on
a million fields.
I'm really tired. I'm like, I'm on the second last week of my contract on Family Feud. So if anyone has a job they want to give me, that's great too. Hit me up.
Disney, are you listening?
No. See, that's the thing. I don't know if I'd work for a studio.
Conflict of interest.
I'd have to give up all this
Shut down
stuff.
the podcast.
I like this stuff too much. I don't know why, but I do. What were we talking about?
I think the movie Prey, Dan Trachtenberg specifically, and his career trajectory kind of being, having a really solid feature film debut.
Oh, he was attached to Uncharted and different things like that. Yeah, anyways.
Yeah, and then, it taking him this long to find the next project, the sophomore, the follow-up effort. So I find that kind of interesting, because usually in a world where white guys fail, upwards instead of downwards, but this guy is actually somewhat a decent filmmaker, unlike, say, Ron Howard, who continues to always get gigs that maybe, this is a whole digression.
Some people like vanilla pudding. Some people like vanilla pudding, man.
I guess. But yeah, anyways, though, Prey is the Predator prequel, which takes place in the 18th century. So we're going before before Arnold, before Jesus, before
The next
Arnie.
before movie before
Yes.
Arnold.
And in it we are taken to the Great Northern Plains, where we are focused on a young Comanche warrior, Naru, played by Amber Midthunder, who wants to prove herself to her people that she is as capable a hunter as her brother and the others in her community. And so with that, she also starts to realize that there's something out there, Matt, something of another world.
Okay, long enough pause where people probably
I
are like,
wanted
was
to. I
something
wanted.
wrong?
I was thinking, do I want to do like an obscure reference to the first
Yeah.
movie where I'm like, over here,
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah.
So that thing that she is sensing, because she's also a very good tracker, is the feral predator. So this is another thing where we'll have to talk about as well, and I guess we could now, where this isn't the first predator to come to Earth. This is the first feral predator to come to Earth. There's a difference between the species. So that's also a big thing that Dan Trachtenberg has been talking about with the release of this movie, and the marketing has been the first predator to come to Earth.
Right, and he clarified, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the predator has possibly been to Earth before. This is the feral predator, who's a much more shredded and ripped version, ready to fight. And so it's basically Midthunder's character versus this predator in a time where you have fur trappers on one end, and a battle of sort of wanting to not only prove yourself, amongst your community, but on top of that, sort of survive this horrific ordeal, which is basically a sci-fi genre flick. And so with that, you've got a lot of the classic, predator tropes, visual references from the previous installment, specifically the 87 movie, the John McTiernan film. But it is trying to do a couple different things here and there. You can tell that a lot of this movie is probably inspired by The Revenant, as much as it is Predator, with just that kind of like stripped down nature. But that's always been the Predator movie, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the lead character basically on their own and having to survive in the wilderness and use the resources available to them because they've run out of their tech or whatever. And with this,
and they're always outmatched by the tech of the predator.
Yeah, because even though this is a feral predator, and it's an earlier predator than the predator that comes into contact with Schwarzenegger and his team, the equipment and weaponry is still much more advanced.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I really enjoyed the shit out of this. Like, I was quite surprised now, this being the 5th Predator movie, I guess 7th or 8th if you count.
You have to put Alien versus Predator and Alien versus Predator Requiem.
Yeah,
it's canon.
I guess they are. So I guess, but that being said, that many, oh God, I can't even fucking speak today. That many Predator movies, I'm surprised that we got something that felt as fresh as it did with this. And I think it was a perfect concept of going, okay, what have we seen time and time again? We've seen Predator versus someone in the jungle, Predator versus in the city, Predator, whatever. And like, it's just kind of been that same thing that you're talking about, a warrior or a group of people against a predator or two predators, and and trying to take it down. And that's pretty much what you get here. But I think that hook of it being set in the it's the 1700s or 1800s 1800s, right?
It's the 18th century, and it's the 1700s.
Yeah, okay. The late 1700s. I just thought that was such a perfect kind of hook for this movie. And I thought just from start to finish, I was just thoroughly impressed with the practical effects, the violence, the action sequences. I thought Amber Midthunder was great. And it is kind of not quite a remake of that first Predator movie, but it did bring me back to how I felt about that first Predator movie. And I like Predator 2 quite a bit. It's
Sweatitor,
sweaty,
as I like to call it.
It's very sweaty. And like I'm hit or miss on the other Predator movies. Like Predators and The Predator I think have good moments, but I find them both sort of kind of forgettable. I still enjoyed Shane
They're
Black's
no
movie even with
AVP.
like those movies are bad. I don't even talk about them. But I just thought like taking it back to this time period and doing something completely different, and how would someone in this time period take down this like beast with all this tech, I thought was just like really really interesting, and how she
So
deals with it,
ripped.
and how her tribe deals with it, how the French deal with it. It's the French, right, that are there. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Now
And
that I just want to quickly mention, because I'm not
jump
trying
in please
to
at any
correct you.
point.
Now,
Yeah,
should we be saying tribe, or should we be saying Comanche Nation? I think that
sure,
like
her
that's
nation.
also,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
because it is important that we get the wording right.
Yeah,
And it's always important to know that, like, okay, when you're talking about this, like that's something that Dan Trachtenberg and
that's fair.
screenwriter Patrick Azin have been very vocal about, and also producer Jane Myers, who is a representative of the Comanche Nation and also the Blackfoot Nation. So she was
Hmm.
very heavily involved in helping with the story and being a consultant on that aspect of it.
Which is a
So
good thing, because it did cross, it is something you think about while you're watching the movie of who made it,
yeah,
and things like that. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, the Comanche Nation and how they deal with this predator coming, and how I liked her relationship with her brother and her family
Tobe.
and things like that. I liked her struggling at the beginning of the movie and just wanting to be taken seriously and wanting to learn to hunt with that axe, and things like that, and that constant progression of her working on that, and no one listening to her, I think was actually kind of a really interesting character development, and throughout the whole movie. And yeah, I just thought it was good. I think it's obviously not perfect. Like I have tons of notes here, and we'll go through it all after I get your brief thoughts. But like even the introduction of the Predator, I thought could have been done way better. Like I just thought like the
Hey,
way
I'm
that
here.
he's yeah, like his fucking Uber drops him off or something, and like is like it does that thing where we're like they need to over explain to the audience like what's happening, where I wish they're like, we all know it's a Predator movie. I mean, I shout out to them for calling it Prey, because that's bad SEO and bad brand recognition for
Well, they still
anyone
keep
who
the
doesn't.
font type though,
Sure, dude,
like
but
the
no
yeah.
one knows that except for like people who like Predator. Like if they just want
Those
my
Pred
mom and
heads.
dad to watch this movie, they don't fucking know that this is a Predator movie. So like I'm actually impressed that they kept that title and that they went with it, because I feel like it's hard to know that this is a movie about, the Predator in this franchise, unless you really kind of jump into it or have seen the trailer or something. So that being said, like I almost wish there was a little bit more mystery at the beginning of the movie, where you're watching a Predator movie, but I just feel like the way that the Predator is introduced was just kind of tacky and lame. Like the special effects were bad with the ship when it came down and dropped them off and flew away, and you had to see it turn on the invisibility and everything, and you're just the cloaking, and like I'm like, it would have been so much cooler if the reveal was when he murders that snake, right, or something, and the blood goes all over him, and like you don't know what's trying to hunt them or what's hunting her, and you could have played around with these different animals, and you brought up all the revenant stuff, and there's stuff with a bear, and there's stuff with different wild animals in the forest and stuff like that, and I think it could have been cool to play around with like what is attacking them and things like that, and keep a little bit of mystery maybe for those people who don't know that this is a Predator movie, rather than kind of setting it up right off the bat that this is what the threat is. But that being said, like I did really like the special effects. I thought the practical effects throughout the movie, even though I kind of said the ship didn't look great when it got dropped off and things like that, but I like the design of this feral predator. I like the special effects throughout the movie. Like I think a lot of times they tried to use as many practical effects as they could, and I think that really stood out. I thought the cinematography was great. um yeah, I just really enjoyed it, man. What about you? We haven't talked much about this. I don't
Well,
know.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I was mixed on it. I
Okay.
like the concept as a whole. I think the Predator series, the film franchise, is basically an anthology series
Okay.
where it's literally, you take a Predator and
Put it
pit
in a
them
different
against an action
situation.
star
Yeah.
or a warrior of some type. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Even though Schwarzenegger, Dutch has kind of loomed large over the franchise just because of Schwarzenegger being Schwarzenegger, and there's always been like that kind of open door policy where it's like people have always kind of hoped that he would come back in some capacity. And there was
almost that scene
the
at
Shane
the
Black
end, yeah,
in The Predator that they were hoping that they'd get him back. But what this does, like what the first the 87 movie does, or what it's trying to do, and I think partly that's why they called it Prey, is because when the 87 movie came out, a lot of people didn't realize that it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, versus an alien from outer space that's coming to, kill people during, this heat wave in the jungle. Like, everybody thought it was like, oh, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger versus, like a militant group or something like that.
Cool.
So there wasn't that expectation of like, oh, this is a creature feature. And so I kind of feel like this movie is doing that a little bit, although we live in a world where, for the people that this is marketed to, they will know what it is. But say like your parents or somebody that is more of a casual moviegoer that stumbles upon this on Disney Plus Canada or Hulu in the US or whatever streaming service it's available on, they'll look at that and maybe watch it and see the ship come in and then see the Predator and kind of be surprised by that, even though it is very blunt in sort of telling you that at this point it is a Predator movie.
Could have been a little bit more interesting.
But I think that's kind of what Trachtenberg is going for there, where it's like it's supposed to be the element of surprise in a weird way. My biggest problem with this movie is the language. I felt that it was totally inconsistent with what it is doing with the language. You mentioned that there is going to be a Comanche dubbed version available. The majority of this movie is spoken in English, but there is some Comanche dialogue.
Very briefly.
Then you have these B villain characters who are these French fur trappers who only speak French with the exception of a translator. But when the translator talks to the Midthunder's character, he's speaking in English, but says that, oh, you're Comanche, and isn't trying to speak Comanche. It's a little bit confusing there. And then I didn't like the visual effects, and I felt like it was an ugly looking movie, and the whole time I was watching it I felt like this is a film that is maybe a step above a sci-fi series
pilot. Wow.
And it really does feel like that's a big part of what this movie is trying to do, that it's a backdoor, franchise starter to do. It's like, okay, let's do like the Predator,
so
in
you
the
did
19th
think it had like a
century.
TV budget because it was a streaming movie, which I get that, but
the visual effects I found to be just ugly, and sometimes it took away from the more practical in-camera VFX work, where like you see the digital blood, you see the even the cloaking. Like, again, rewatching all of these movies, and I think it's like, okay, well, it's made from the time that we're living in now. It's a world where a lot of stuff is done in post-production, but I found it to be perfectly suitable as a streamer and not a film that I would go to the theater and watch and be like, I felt it was a TV pilot. I literally was watching this thing and thinking like, this feels like a proof of concept for a potential spin-off series, whether they be TV movies or a series going on, because even this isn't really spoiling anything, but if you stay to the animated end credits, you'll see something that kind of tips something off to a potential continuation, where it's like, okay, let's put the Predator...
everything. It's obviously a franchise they want to monetize it and keep going, because
it wouldn't even necessarily be following Naru in the future.
No, it could be at any time. It could be really...
And that's like the point of what this is doing, right? Like, it's like, what if, the Predator versus this character,
the mafia in the 1950s or
something exactly, or pirates or something like that.
And that I like that idea. I'm throwing it out there.
I like the concept, but I just felt the execution and style was a very kind of limited and uninspired adaptation. And like you can tell that Trachtenberg is doing what he can with the limited resources that he has, and I think he did it better with 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is
Yeah.
basically a single
I
location
like 10 Cloverfield
thriller.
Lane more, don't get me
I
wrong, but like
Yeah.
I
And
I
I don't hate this either. I'm just being more
no,
critical of
that's
I feel
fair.
like I'm
It's so interesting
on
because
the
I just never
outlier.
a little bit, I
Yeah.
think, but like that's just it's fascinating to me because like I obviously respect your opinion greatly, but like I never got that vibe. I always kind of liked the look of it, and there were a few times, like I mentioned, that I did go ooh, like that didn't look great, like, and those happen a few times throughout the movie, but I felt like whether it was the animals that they were using, like there were times where they tried to use a puppet or practical effect. I get you with the digital blood sometimes and the cloaking and some of the more
The mountain
digital
lion.
effects. Yeah, the like things like that didn't look great all the time, and I'll give you that. And we are watching it on a crappy like a screener thing too that's in like 720p. So I am curious to watch it like in 4K Dolby Vision and stuff like that because I think I will watch the Comanche version because I like this movie enough. Like I just thought it was thoroughly enjoyable all the way through. But I liked kind of the spray to melt the face of the animal to get the skull. I liked kind of some of those effects throughout that like, and I can't remember. You're more of a Predator historian than I
A
am. If
pred
that's
head,
in,
please.
sorry, a Pred head than I am. Do they show that in the other movies
They
or?
do in
Yeah,
They start that in Predator 2, where you see the Predator kind of cleaning the trophies.
yeah,
In the first film, it's really just him collecting,
ripping.
like
Yeah,
the one scene when after you don't see Billy die, but you see the Predator with the body on the tree and him
yeah.
ripping the spine out of the back and like stuff like that. But yes, there was always kind of like a technique to the polishing of the trophy
Yeah, because I think
in
that
the series.
because you go, well, how did he get the skull so clean? So they go
Yeah.
and kind of explain that. And I know even watching that in this, I just liked that melting effect, which is obviously we've seen time and time again. And I just still think the Predator is such a cool design of an alien or a creature or a monster that it's just.
Well,
And I
you know the
thought this
story
version
behind
of
that
it.
too, right?
Refresh me.
Okay,
I
so
would have
the
heard it
original
before,
design
but
of the creature was this kind of lizard-like thing,
yeah,
and the guy in the suit for the and they shot some of the scenes, and you can go online and look at photos of it,
I
was
will do that
Jean-Claude
after.
Van Damme as
Right.
this lizard-like creature, but then John McTiernan and the cinematographer weren't really liking the dailies that they were getting, and so Stan Winston went back and redesigned it, and then they let Jean Claude Van Damme go because the suit was a different body
Like,
type at that
yeah.
point, right? And so, like, even in the other interesting thing that I always forget about is that clicking that the Predator does, that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
is Peter Cullen, who's the
Oh,
voice of
yeah?
Optimus Prime,
Yeah. Who does
which is
every voice, yeah. Who
which is
does, like,
also
random things.
yeah, and I was thinking about this as well because he's not credited for the clicking in this, and he's not credited in future Predator movies. So it's like, at what point does somebody's voice work just become a sound reference or a reference point?
Mhm.
Because like his clicking, he was the one that recorded that in the original version, and he's
And if they
credited for
just
that, and they've
use that
used
over
it
and over again.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how that works exactly, but just going throughout, like, I like some of the juxtaposition between how of an expert hunter the Predator was and how she was kind of an amateur and still learning. Like I thought the editing and the way that the film is structured, while it's very obvious at times of what they're
it's on the
doing.
nose.
Yeah, it is on the nose. Don't get me wrong, but I liked it for that. Like, and usually I'm someone who maybe doesn't, but like for some reason I felt like it worked in this of the smash cuts from the Predator like killing some sort of animal in some fucking brutal way and just like being an expert at killing, and then smash cutting to her trying to hunt a deer or trying to throw her tomahawk and like things like that of just trying to get good at something, and just that kind of back and forth between how the hell is she ever going to take this thing down, but she's determined to do so. And I just felt like, yeah, it on the nose, sure, but I feel like on the nose is fine in certain situations if it's building on character and growing a character throughout the movie, both on the Predator side of thing and Naru. Yeah, Naru,
Naru,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought that was done really well, and they do it over and over throughout the film, and that's where the bulk of that kind of character development and growth goes, because it is this one-on-one battle for the most part. There are other people involved, but they do it a few times, and I feel like I don't know, like I just felt the story structure was set up really, really well, with like payoffs at the end of the movie and things that they set up previously. And I know we've talked about this before, and we brought it up in something else recently, I can't even remember, where sometimes that can be eye rolling or just feel like a lazy screenwriting thing of like everything you reference earlier in the movie has to come back in at the end, and things like that. And that does happen in this movie, but um I found myself more often going, oh, okay, cool, like that's how she's going to use that we saw earlier in the movie, rather than going, of course that fucking thing comes back and that's how you're going to deal with this. Like
Yeah,
I don't
Chekhov's
know.
tomahawk.
Yeah, tomahawk, bog, whatever you want to like. There's lots of things like that where I just, to me personally, I felt like they did a good job with that juxtaposition between those two characters, and it did help me, pit these two against each other. And I actually like loved when they smash cut to the other person and knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, it's hard to miss it. Like you said, it's pretty on the nose, but like I still found myself super engaged because of that, because I was always interested in both what the Predator was doing and what Naru was doing and her journey throughout. I liked her dog buddy. Like I thought he was great, or he or she. Um,
Seti, I believe,
um,
was the name of the dog.
yeah. And I just like that, it's a survivor versus a hunter. And then, the hunter becomes the hunted. And I just thought, like, it's such a cliche, or just like a thing that's been done a million times, but I just thought it was done super, super well, personally.
Yeah, there are certain things I like in terms of callbacks or references to the franchise or the canon. I actually
For the
really
pred
thought,
heads.
for the Pred heads, I really thought the way that she was able to conceal her body heat
Mm-hmm.
was clever. But then there's stuff in it that's clunky. You mentioned sort of a bog quicksand kind of scenario, which part of that
I like
is
that sequence, the
necessary.
first
I
one.
I do, but also at the same time, I can tell what Trachtenberg is doing with that, because when you see that character pull herself out of the situation, the way that she's lying on that kind of perfectly set designed uh fake facade
Yeah,
of these logs is basically
almost like a dam.
Schwarzenegger. Well, no, it's no, not the
Oh,
dam, like
not the dam, but
the logs
oh, when she
that
goes on the other side. Yeah.
when she's kind of leaning on it
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this,
yeah,
for the
yeah.
people that are watching this. That's Schwarzenegger's pose covered in mud
Absolutely,
when
yeah.
he jumps off the waterfall and is basically the last man standing in his group. And then there's another moment where her hands are tied and she's on the ground, and that's the way that they've taken the one hostage character from Predator. And there were compositions like that where it's like, see, look, I'm a fan. And then they get really bogged into it where it's like fanboyish to the point where it's like, if it bleeds, we can kill it. And it's just like, okay, like, come on, you don't
They
need
wouldn't
that.
say that. Yeah, like they
Yeah,
said
like
the same line. Yeah.
there's something a little like, I know that they're reflecting contemporary themes and ideas within sort of,
Yeah.
a period setting. I
Sure.
understand they're going for that, and
But
I don't
that's
mind that
maybe a
at
step
all.
too far. Yeah.
Even the search party that comes to look for Naru, like, there's a couple guys in that group that kind of feel like they're like obligated actors, and it's like, guys, I gotta be at Applebee's for a date at 10. Like, can we get this done? Like, come
I
on. Like,
sure.
it's
Um
not bad. I sound like I'm being, overly negative to
yeah.
the film. I think it's a great concept for this franchise that doesn't really have a through line, with the exception of the Predator. It's a fun movie in that it's playing with the genre tropes in a way that we've come to expect in the last decade or so,
Mhm.
where we're looking at both the side of representation, but also kind of, embedding it in a way that kind of works within the milieu of the tropes and the storyline. I think that,
Yeah.
looking at, this young Comanche warrior who is a woman who's competing against, a kind of a gender sort of
Yeah.
stereotype and
Who
sort of
no one
gender
takes her
roles,
seriously. Yeah.
and she's trying to prove herself not only to her nation, but also to the predator, because the
Yeah.
predator does not see her as a
There's
threat.
a threat. Yeah.
And I just feel the best representation of this entire movie, or the thing that sums this film up perfectly, is that it's so close to kind of being its own thing, but because it's a tomahawk with a rope tied to it, the rope is the rest of the franchise, and it has to keep pulling back to, you know, these clunky lines of dialogue where it's like, okay, we have to make sure that you know that this is a Predator movie.
Sure.
We can't just completely do our own thing with the predator. It's like we
Yeah,
still have
I
to have
think-
dumb lines like, if it bleeds we can kill it, which is
Yeah.
a fun line in that movie. But it would be basically like doing a Die Hard movie and doing a prequel, and
Some person in the
says yippee-ki-yay that isn't
Yeah.
John McClane.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you there. Didn't bother me because I think it could go one of two ways for Pred heads. I think they could take it your way, or they'll take it the way, which
Yeah.
I think either way is fine. I get both sides of that. Going back to the language thing, I totally understand what you said way back at the beginning of the review. I know we're 30 minutes in, but like, I brought up the Comanche version. I agree with you where that did bother me at first, but then understood that was just a style choice that they made of going like, we're just going to have everyone speak English, except like you said, the Frenchmen, like we're speaking French, and then saying they were speaking Comanche, but then spoke English because Trachtenberg even talked about it in an interview where he
The
was going
Hunt
to
for
do
Red
that.
October.
Yeah, where he was going to do that, but he's like, it just didn't really work. So we just had everyone speak English. And I'm assuming that was a studio thing, to be honest. And then they were like, well, you can just dub it in Comanche if you want, but don't.
Also John McTiernan, who directed Hunt for the Red October.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. I think the better choice would have been shooting it in Comanche and then dubbing it in English if you wanted to watch the English version. I think that would have been more interesting. I think that would have been more true to, the Comanche Nation and respectful and things like that. Like, and I'm sure everyone who was involved was like, no, we can do the English version. Like that's fine. But I agree with you that in the movie, they are speaking Comanche, but we're hearing it in English. So it's a little jarring or weird, but it's just, it's an American movie, so we have to put it in English, right? And I
Right.
agree with you that choice I don't love, even though I thought like, everyone did a good job.
But it's also weird considering that this is the same studio that released Apocalypto, and Apocalypto was not spoken in English, and it was
Very
a
different.
huge box office film
I
in
get
terms
you,
of
but-
like an action thriller chase movie that had no movie stars. I mean, obviously, I mean, Mel Gibson is the worst human being in the world, but it's like, why not have the Comanche version? Why not just have that as if you're going to dive into this and be as respectful and truthful as possible, then yes, have it spoken in Comanche.
Dub it in English. Give people the option. Like,
yes,
have it be the opposite. That's what should have happened. And I totally agree with you, because right when I watched this movie and had a similar thought to you, going, I hate when movies do this. Like, I thought we're beyond that point now where we're like, okay, well, you guys are morons, so we have to have this movie in English, because even though it takes place in France or it takes place in Germany or it takes place whatever, it's just like everyone speaks English because, they're speaking their native language, but you're hearing it in English. And I just think we were beyond that point, and it's a more interesting movie if you don't dumb it down for people, and if they want the dumbed down version, then go listen to an English dub or something like that. So I'm with you there. One last thing, I'm a sucker for it, but I love the single take fight sequence. I thought it was awesome. It's a very easy get. If you want to get me in a movie, is just include a cool single take fight sequence, or a single take, not even a fight sequence, just an extended single take. I know it's just something filmmakers love to do and show off that they can pull it off or something like that. But I thought the fight choreography throughout all of that was awesome. And I just I rewound it, because like any single take sequence, you start watching and then like halfway through the scene, you're like, oh, they haven't cut yet. This is all one cut. And I'm like, and then I had to go back and rewatch it, knowing that it was a single take. And I thought it was awesome. Her just absolutely slaughtering people.
Yeah, I have to say again that Amber Midthunder is very good in this, and
Yeah.
hopefully, whether it be a Marvel or something like she'll have some franchise to I mean, whether
Mhm.
she want, they can figure out a way to keep her character going or what have you. But I was kind of nervous going into this as well, because the only thing I had seen her in before was that horrible Liam Neeson uh truck movie, The Ice Road. And
She was
she,
in Hell or
along
High Water as
oh
well,
yeah, she
right?
had yes, she had a very
Small,
small
but like,
role in that.
yeah.
But her role in The Ice Road is terrible. Like, everybody in that movie is bad. Like,
Yeah,
if you had never
I
seen a
wouldn't
Liam,
blame her.
no, 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 no. But I'm glad that she has this now, because like I do feel that people probably have watched The Ice Road with Liam Neeson, whether it be on Netflix in the US or on streaming here. And like, if you had never seen a Liam Neeson movie before and had only seen this, you would say that Liam Neeson is the worst actor ever. Or Lawrence Fishburne, who again, another Predator references, because Lawrence Fishburne's in Predators, and he's terrible in Predators, but he's also terrible in The Ice Road. So sometimes it's how you use an actor. It's
Yeah,
whether or not they're kind of finding a rhythm with the material. And I would say she's very good in this, Amber Midthunder, and I would like to see what she can do with a property of her own. Like
I
like
agree.
tailor something around her, and not
Mhm.
just put her in a franchise. But if she wants to continue doing franchises too, that's great. Just
I'm sure she's gonna be a huge star. She's great in this, and
yeah,
I
and
think
shot in
that like,
Alberta too, we should
yeah,
mention.
shout out
Yeah.
to Alberta. Yes, I think she will be great in something. I don't know if she'll stick around for this. Like, I like your idea of jumping to different time periods, kind of like what they did with the X-Men movies, or like um what other kind of anthology series jumps ahead in different times. But
Well, even
either way,
Alien, in a way, like, even though it has Ripley in
sure.
that original
And it's in the
quadrilogy,
future, so they're future things, but they do jump
yeah.
around in time, right?
But the
But
Predator franchise in general has always been fascinating, because it really is like, okay, it's just the Predator fighting a new actor,
yeah.
a new
Yes.
lead in something. And that's all you need sometimes. I think like the Predator is iconic enough in design that, you can sell a movie based on just the creature. Obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger is, or was anyways, a big name, and at the time that movie came out, people were seeing it because it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. It wasn't a Predator movie. They didn't know that
Mhm.
it was, like this weird sci-fi film. And then, because it did so well, you had someone like Danny Glover as the lead in the
Mhm.
sequel. And then,
So sweaty.
it's one of the
But I
sweatiest
just like
movies
each
ever.
one, yeah, in the jungle in the first one, in the city in the second one, everyone's
And then you
still
go back
sweaty.
to the
Um,
jungle with Adrian Brody
but
and
it's
Mahershala
on
Ali
their
and
planet, isn't it? Or a different
yes, yeah.
planet? Or
It's
like,
on their
yeah.
planet, but it's kind of basically mimicking like that movie. Like, that's another. So I in my Rogers review, I'm bringing this up because
How
Predator.
fucking dare you?
Yes, I'm just regurgitating everything I said in my Rogers review. But Predator has always kind of been that non-starter franchise where it keeps kind of rebooting itself in the way that a Terminator does, where it's like, okay, it didn't really work after, T2. After T2, it was kind of like, let's just try this again. And then it's like, okay, the car's not starting, let's leave it for a while, come back to it, let's start it up again and see if this time it works. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, and then we leave it for a while and then come back to it. Like Predator could just be a one and done thing, but it's weird sort of trajectory with even with the Alien franchise. Like, the first time you see a reference to Alien, because they were both Fox
Yeah.
films, is in Predator 2, where Danny Glover's on the ship and sees, these
Wayland Yutani or something, doesn't he?
no,
Or
no, no, the skull of the alien.
right,
So
okay.
what one of
I
its
thought
one of
no,
its
that's in
trophy,
Blade Runner or something I'm thinking of, yeah.
that's Blade Runner and Soldier. That
Yeah.
there's the reference to Kurt
Right.
Russell movie, because it's the same writer. But with Predator 2, you see the alien
The
skull in
xenomorph
its
skull?
trophy.
Yeah.
Yes, in the trophy case. And at that time, everybody was like, "Oh, maybe one day they'll cross the
And
franchises
they
over."
did, and
And
boy,
they
they
did,
did.
and we all regretted it ever since. But like, even that is interesting, where like it's just never. Predator has been sold really on just the creature itself and just putting it in an environment that's either the suburbs or the city or the jungle. And then, sometimes you'll have a big action star or somebody that's known from a franchise fight it, or then you'll have Adrian Brody, which kind of feels like a Mad Libs, version of Predator, and then with the Predator, having Shane Black come in and try to kind of revitalize the series with a guy who was in the first Predator movie.
I remember
It
being
was
so
okay.
excited for that, and it was fine.
It's fine, but that movie also has a really fascinating. It's more interesting in terms of its backstory, or like the behind the scenes of it all, because you have a film that originally had a completely different third act and then was rewritten and cut out an entire character in Edward James Olmos being removed. And then the day that we saw it at TIFF was the day when Shane Black was called out for supporting his sex offender friend, and Olivia Munn was the only one of the cast and crew to speak up about it. And it was like the day that we were seeing it.
Weird,
so
and it has some weird ableist kind of making fun of people.
Thomas Jane with Tourette's and Jacob Tremblay who's on the autism spectrum. It's just like
it's got some not great stuff in it, but then there is some good stuff in that. I am in that camp where I think this competes with that original Predator movie for me. I know that maybe sounds hyperbolic, but I'm kind of with you where the Predator franchise has been kind of up and down. I still really like that second movie.
A lot of people don't. Like a lot of people like this. It's Predator and Prey are the bookends, where like everything else is kind of disposable. Where I love Predator 2, not necessarily because of just being a sequel to Predator, but I just like it as this sweaty early 90s action movie.
Oh yeah, Predator in the City is awesome. Come on.
Like you got Danny Glover, you got Bill Paxton, you got Gary Busey.
Yes,
I mean, come on.
I like Predator 2. I still think I like this more, but like again, an up and down franchise, but I think, I would have liked to see this on a theater. That's where I kind of disagree with you again. Like watching it, I went, man, I would have liked to sit in a movie theater and watch this instead of watching this in bed where I watched it. And I don't know, but streaming might be the right place for some of these franchises too. Like I hate saying that, but like it might let them take a few more risks with these franchises and do more interesting things because they don't have to worry about it bombing at the box office or stumbling or anything like that. Like I don't think you get this movie with, relative, like Amber Midthunder, like you said, was in a couple things, but she's not like a big name by any means. You don't really have any big name actors in this. You rely mostly on the Predator, but then you don't even call it Predator. Like I'm surprised they didn't call it Predator: Prey or something like that, and you just call it Prey. Even that itself is a risk, I think, to me, to get people to like know what this movie is. So I'm interested to see what they do with Predator and Alien and Die Hard, and maybe they, putting things on Hulu or Disney Plus like allows them to kind of do some things they wouldn't do in theaters, and then maybe one day someone will screen it in a theater so I can see it in a theater. But like I'm curious to see where they go from here. I love your idea of different time periods and just pitting them against some sort of very well known group or something like that, whether it's like you said, pirates or mafia or Vikings.
Who's the Predator and who's the prey, right?
And I think that's really cool. Like, and then that way you bring in different tech, different weapons, different means, different locations, and I think that could be a really cool way. And you have the the span of time to do that, right? Like you could go back and have predators versus dinosaurs or something. Like you could do whatever you want, but I think there could be some cool stuff there. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I really, really liked this. I think it's not without its faults, whether it's some of that special effects that you're talking about or, some stumbles here and there. So I'm going to give it a 4. I still really, really liked it. It's just outside of my top 10 of the year. I just think I think you can't go wrong watching this on streaming. Like you already have Disney Plus or you have Hulu in the US. Like if you're into the Predator franchise, like I think you'll at least lowest thing be like Eric and go, it was fine. And at most you're going to be like me, who's likes the Predator movies and go, oh shit, that was really good. I really, really enjoyed that. Like, so I think it's solid 4 out of 5.
I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Again, I think it's definitely, like, you look at where we are right now in the summer movie season, there's not a lot coming out from now until the end of August.
And
if you have Disney Plus in Canada or Hulu, and it's there, watch it. And if you like the Predator franchise or are vaguely familiar with it, and you just are looking for an alien sort of horror sci-fi kind of mix, give it a go. It's one of those films where it's like, I think I had higher expectations going into it because of Dan Trachtenberg, because of the setting, because of the concept, but I just felt a little underwhelmed by it all, where I think like it kind of fits nicely within the film franchise, but it's nowhere near as good as that first movie, and it doesn't have to be, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, you know, let it stand on its own, and it partly does, and then it partly doesn't, and it kind of feels like it still needs to tell you that it is a Predator movie, and it's like, we get it's a Predator movie, you don't have to tell us, just show us, let it be.
I agree with
let
that
the Predator
part.
fight a bear. I want more of that.
That was cool.
That's a
that
good
was really
scene.
cool. That is a
Yeah.
good scene. He just, oh my god, it is a really cool scene. And I agree with you. Just let
I
it
wanted
be
him to fight a
100%.
beaver, but you know, unfortunately, you don't get
Let
what
him
you want all the time.
hunt. Let him
Yeah.
hunt. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Let us know what you thought of Prey.
I didn't find this spine tingling.
I hate you. I hate you so much. The ripping out of the spines, still cool. Still
The
cool.
sound
Is like,
on that is incredible. Like
Yeah.
again, like watching that first movie again, but even the sequels where you see the Predator collecting its trophy.
yeah.
There's just something that is very visceral and disturbing about it, and like you're watching it and you're thinking like, yeah, it's an R-rated action sci-fi thriller horror movie, but at the same time it's pretty gnarly, and there's some really violent stuff in Predator too.
Absolutely. Go check out our newest episode of the Untitled Movie podcast, where we talk about what's going on with HBO Max, the Batgirl cancellation, what Mr. Zaslav's up to. We talk about a new thing, a TIFF Talk, where we talk about Midnight Madness, speaking of Predator that played a few years ago. What else are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the Daniels signing a deal with Universal. That's why I got my Everything Everywhere shirt on.
You went to the US, you saw the Cursed Child.
So much. So go check out that episode of the Untitled Movie podcast. We also have other reviews out right now that you guys can go check out for BJ Novak's Vengeance, Jordan Peele's Nope, which is both a review and spoiler cast double in one episode. Eric's brother Kyle. He's not two people. He's just one person.
Wait a second.
The Russo brothers, the Grayman, Taika Waititi's Thor: Love and Thunder are all available for you guys to listen to. Also, Eric and I broke down all of the galas and special presentations that were announced for TIFF 2022 in a episode of TIFF Talk, where we did it separately from the main podcast. So you guys can go check that out as well. If easiest place to find everything, head over to Letterboxd, which is Untitled_cast. And as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And premiering in September, Family Feud Canada, Season 4. I wrote and produced a lot of questions. I don't know when my questions will be on, and you'll never know if I wrote them or not. So just think of it as Matt probably wrote that. If it's a good one, Matt wrote it. If it's a bad one, I didn't write it. I probably maybe did, but just think I didn't. So September, CBC, 4 nights a week. Go check that out. I'm sure I'll tell you guys more when it's closer to that premiere date in early September. I think it premieres during TIFF. So much going on in September. It's going to be crazy. Follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews, including my Prey review, on rogerstv.com/cinemascene, and on all the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
I'd like to dedicate this one to all the Pred heads.